All right. Welcome everyone to the Tuesday, January 10th, 2023. I'm going to have to remember to say that. Tumwater City Council work session. So welcome everyone. So let's see. I was going to see if there's, I'm seeing if everyone is present. I think, did I see Peter is here? Yes, he's just not on camera. So everyone is here. So we have a couple of items on the agenda this evening. First one is going to be how property tax works, and then also a presentation from Watts. So I will go ahead and kick it off and have John Doan introduce and start this. So John.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, so one of the more complex things that we deal with is property tax, and it all sort of appears sort of magical, but it's less than magical. And we have with us the magician of property tax, Jeff Gadman, who's our esteemed county treasurer, and he's going to walk us through sort of some of the intricacies of local government property tax. And an opportunity for questions. Remember, it's more than a quarter, but less than a third of our revenue source in the general fund. And when we talk about things like fire authorities and libraries and other kinds of things that have impacts on our property tax, it's good to have some understanding of how that works. So Jeff and I were in a conversation, and he said he does programs like this for elected officials. And I thought, wow, this is it. This would be wonderful. So with that sort of disjointed opening, let me turn it over to the esteemed magician of property tax, Jeff Gadman.
Well, thank you, John. And yeah, John, as John said, I'm Jeff Gadman, Thurston County Treasurer. Thank you, Mayor Sullivan and the rest of the council for entertaining me tonight. By way of background, I have been at the county for over 36 years. I worked over 30 years in the assessor's office, and I was appointed to county treasurer in early 2017 and have been there ever since. And one of the things that I really like to do is educate people on how the property tax system works, because it is complex and it is difficult to understand. But I'm hoping I can simplify it a little for you for when you go to make budgeting decisions. And that's the target of my presentation, is to try and help you understand what happens as you make your budgeting decisions with regards to the property tax. So feel free to chime in with questions at any time. I do have a slide at the end where I just say questions. So if you have any that you've saved for the end, we're perfectly able to accommodate those. Let's see, how do I share my screen?
Do you have a share screen button on the bottom, or?
Let me see, I might. It won't let me. Oh yeah, there we go. I'm not as technically savvy as some of you. So share screen. Oh, look at that. Bing, can you all see that?
Yes, we can.
All right. So I do several presentations on investments and property taxes. This is the opening screen, and this is our mission statement. Maintain the public's trust by managing their funds with integrity, while utilizing best professional practices to provide excellent customer service with a staff that is responsive, knowledgeable, efficient, courteous. And that is our goal with every single transaction, every single day. So why is it not? There we go. Whoop. Okay, so just a quick review. The amount of property tax levied each year is determined by the budget needs of each tax district. So basically what that means is tax district decides what they need to operate for next year. Fire department says, hey, I need 5 million, or fire district says, hey, I need $5 million next year. They turn that budget request or budget need into the Thurston County Commissioners. The commissioners pass it to the assessor. The assessor then does the levy calculation. We'll go over that in a few minutes, but basically that budget need is applied to all of the taxable assessed value in that tax district. And that's how we come up with a levy rate. And of course, you're setting your budget based on what your citizen needs are, right? What do they need next year? How are the kind of parks maintenance issues do you have, infrastructure maintenance, police, fire, all of that. So portion of the budget to be derived from property taxes applied to the taxable assessed value and to determine the levy rate. So for instance, your boundaries for your tax district are the city limits of Tumwater. So all of the property that lies within Tumwater that is taxable is subject to whatever levy rate is applied. But it's important to know that other jurisdictions can own property within your jurisdiction. Olympia owns property within the city of Tumwater. Port of Olympia owns property in the city of Tumwater. Thurston County owns property within the city of Tumwater. But and while they are tax exempt, they are not exempt from your weed assessments and such as that if you have any. Basically, levy rates and assessed values are on a teeter-totter, like I have on the image at the bottom there. Generally speaking, the more the total assessed value goes up, the lower the levy rate, all things being equal, and vice versa. Very, very important, and this is an important point that I like to make with people. The assessed value of your property does not determine your property taxes. But it is important for your assessed value to be fair in relation to your neighbors, because your assessed value determines your share of that tax district's budget for that year. So levy calculations depend on the amount of revenue. The graphic on the right is the tax distribution for the entire county for 2022. On the left, this is just a calculation example. This is actually from the Port of Olympia for 2018, which was another presentation that I did. They set their budget at $6,452,560.33. It was applied to the taxable assessed value. In this case, their boundaries are the entire county. The assessed value of 35 billion and change came out with a levy rate of a little over 18 cents per thousand. And that would be the rate that they would charge in 2019. So the levy will be added to all of the other levies within a tax code area. So like where your house is, all of you are Tumwater residents, so you live in the city of Tumwater. So you've got the city of Tumwater budget that you're paying into, Timberland Library, Port of Olympia, Medic One, and various other. All of the levies that feed the budgets of those tax districts are added together, come up with a total levy rate for your particular property. So we're going to start with a base year. I'm going to walk you through a couple of examples here. So let's say it's a $5 million budget. It's a $30 billion assessed value. So this is really simple, but this is basically what happens in the background. $5 million budget against a $30 billion taxable assessed value comes out with a levy rate of a little over 16 cents per thousand. So in Washington State, levy rates are expressed per thousand. As you get further east, and especially as you get into the eastern United States and the Northeast in particular, a lot of them are millage rates. They'll do their levy rates in dollars per hundred. So let's go to the following year. So we had our levy rate of a little over 16. It was 1667 basically cents per thousand. So the next year, the district elects to increase their revenue at the 1% maximum limit. But the assessed values didn't change that, which is highly unusual. So we've got now a $5,050,000 budget against a $30 billion taxable assessed value. And our levy rate now is 1683 instead of 1667. So notice here that the levy rate increased, and that was because the budget increased, but the assessed value did not. They keep remembering the teeter-totter. So now we're going to go to year B. In this year, they've taken, and this is a scenario B rather. So the tax district is elected to take the 1% limit. So now their budget is $5,050,000. The assessed value increased 5%. So now the assessed value is $31,500,000. So now we apply those two numbers together and we come out with a rate that's just a hair over 16 cents. So that is less levy than our original rate of 1667. And again, that's because the assessed value along with the revenue adjustment work together to change that levy rate. So now if I take scenario B, let me go back, we're at 0.16032. And now we're going to go to the next following year. And the district has elected to take their 1% limit, plus assessed values increased another 7%. So we're at a $5,100,500 budget for the tax district now, and a $33,705,000 taxable assessed value. So now notice the levy rate has gone down to just a hair over 15 cents. So while assessed values went up, that levy rate dropped. It's kind of an equalizing force, and it's one of the things that I've always found fascinating about property taxes in Washington State. And this works in other jurisdictions too. But really, that there's a balance there, so that you're not, if your assessed value goes up 7%, you're not getting hit with a 7% tax increase. That's not what that means. So in addition to the 1% limit that you're stuck with, which is miserable in 8% inflation, none of the revenue for new construction is affected by that 1% limit. So if we go back to the original and you've got a $5 million budget, your 1% raise goes up another 50,000. Whatever levy rate comes down at the end of that calculation, the new construction is added to that. So that's where you get additional revenue beyond the 1% limit if you've got an active construction base in your community. In addition to that, I didn't create a slide for this because this can get pretty complicated, but you're also entitled to a refund levy. I don't know if your finance director has probably talked to you about this, but so this year you're expecting $5 million. And because of adjustments to assessed values, for whatever reason, you get a lot of senior citizens that qualify for the exemption mid-year. You get properties that buildings get destroyed and that sort of thing, and their assessed value gets reduced mid-year. They're entitled to reductions in taxes for that year. So you didn't quite collect the $5 million you were expecting. So what the legislature has enabled is a refund levy. So let's say you only collected $4,800,000 because of the adjustments to the assessed values. The legislature will allow you to capture that $200,000 that you didn't collect the next year to make you whole. And that's something that's only come on board in the last 5 or 6 years. That hasn't always been the case. It used to be that if a tax district lost revenue due to adjustments in assessed value, they were out. That was it. They just didn't get that revenue. Makes it much trickier for budgeting, if you can imagine. So as I started with, generally speaking, levy rates tend to rise and fall in opposite correlation with assessed values. So, and then the corollary there is as assessed values fall, levy rates tend to rise. If you noticed in any of the you that were working in budgets back in about 2009, 10, 11, 12 in that area where assessed values were falling, levy rates were increasing because your budgets weren't changing, right? It still cost X amount of dollars to send a fire truck to a house. And so that really created some crimps on budgets for a lot of taxing districts. So I started at the county in 1986. At that time, our average levy rate was $16.50 per thousand. In the time that I've worked at the county, the average levy rate countywide, this is for a total tax code area, has ranged between $10.50 and $18. And that flows and wanes with the economy. For 2022, the total average levy rate was about $11.35. I wanted to bring you the brand new 2023 number and explode it in all of its glory, but it wasn't available yet. Sorry. So some considerations on the 1% limit, because you can elect to take that 1% or not, right? In any given year. If you choose not to take that 1% in any given year, that levy capacity gets banked for future years. Meaning, let's say you don't take it for 3 years in a row. That revenue opportunity has not been lost. You're able to go back and capture some of that in a subsequent year if you want to. However, what I will say is if you don't take that 1% because you feel it's not prudent, you feel like your constituents aren't in the mood for it, whatever, if you lose all of the investment revenue you would have got from that additional revenue for all of those years. And so that is another consideration, because I'm investing your money every day. And the interest revenue, well, I'm not your revenue, sorry, your city of Tullamore, you have your own investment, but your finance director is investing your money every day. And if you don't have that revenue coming in, you're not able to earn that investment interest on that. So it's very, very important. The court did not take their 1% limit for 6 years in a row. And it amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost revenue for them, just from the investment revenue that they lost. So obviously, considerations for the 1%, what's the economy doing? You know, I mean, it's really hard to, in a high inflationary time as a policymaker, you're looking at, man, I mean, every single one of the people that you serve is paying more out of their pocketbook every month for everything. And here comes the city council, and you're going to add 1% to your budget again. So that's definitely a consideration as a policymaker you have to make, and what is the best needs of your constituents. You know, what is the recent current inflation? Obviously, this last year, inflation just exploded, I think, beyond anybody's expectations, and it looks like it might be slowing down, but it's not going to come down to the levels we saw over the last 10 years anytime soon. Latest projections I get from the Fed are it will probably be 2025 before we see inflation down around that 2% level they're looking for. So that is another consideration, because you can only increase your revenue 1% against the inflation. You know, the inflation forecast, the economic forecast for the state of Washington. Oh my God, Dr. Lurch, he is so awesome. Attend every seminar you can with him, because he tells you things that are going to help guide you and your decisions. It is possible to go beyond the 1%. Like I said, we're at 8% inflation. It is possible to go beyond the 1%, but you've got to ask your voters to approve that for you. So that was quick and dirty. It was overly simplified, but I gave you the basics, the foundations for how property taxes work and how the calculations work. And I will be happy to answer any questions. And of course, I'm always available to talk about this because you can tell I get excited about it.
Any questions?
I have a question.
Who is, oh, Councilmember Kathy.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna try to pull it over and say you took that picture of the sunset from your deck.
No, this is my vacation view, not my home view.
All
If it
right.
was my home view, I would never get to work.
Okay, the question I have is, if a person is a senior and qualifies for different kinds of, exemptions or anything like that, can they take those if the property they own is a rental?
No,
Okay.
the senior and disabled exemption is only valid for a property that you occupy at least 6 months of the year. And you can only have one in Washington State. You actually can only have one nationwide.
One exemption?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there are other states that offer similar exemptions. And the assessor's offices are constantly cross-checking each other to try and make sure there's no duplication.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dalhoff.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Jeff. Nice to see
Hi.
you in this virtual world. Joan reminded me of a question regarding seniors. It happens every meeting.
Yeah.
Regarding seniors in our community. Have there been any discussions regarding, I know it's low income seniors, right? And that threshold, I know more and more seniors that don't meet that threshold, but still, are limited by whatever retirement, Social Security or benefits from a spouse or a widow, and they still can't afford, right? There's no extra money. Has there been any talk at any association or any meetings you go to about expanding exemptions or exceptions for seniors?
Constantly. And there's a mechanical level here discussion where anytime somebody's exempted, so let's say somebody's normal property tax bill would be $4,000 and they get exempted to where they're only paying $1,000. Well, that $3,000 is shifted to everybody else in that tax code area. So the money doesn't go away. It means everybody else pays. So there's the mechanical discussion, right? How much burden are we going to throw off on other people? Because at some point, those other people are going to start to squawk too, right? And then you get the philosophical argument, because right now our threshold in Thurston County is a little over 48,000. And the good thing is the legislature did index it to inflation 3 years ago. So that helps. So they indexed it to inflation. So it's revisited every 4 years, and they indexed it to each county's median income, because $48,000 in say Wenatchee is a lot different than $48,000 in Olympia or Seattle. So the philosophical debate comes back to, one of the things that you've been hearing a lot about is $15 minimum wage. So let's go to the practical side of that, right? $15 minimum wage isn't even $32,000 a year before taxes. And so somebody making minimum wage is making less than 32,000, probably taking home 28, and probably spending 20 to 22 of that on their rent. And then giving a senior an exemption at 48,000. This is where the legislature starts to get a little bit woozy about talking about this, because they look at what the median income is in a given area and they go, do we start giving more exemptions to people with higher income at the expense of people with lower income? I don't have an answer for you, and I'm not going to certainly weigh in here because it's not my place, but that's just part of the philosophical discussion that happens.
Thank you, Jeff. So I'm still depressed, but thank you for letting me know that there are discussions happening.
You know, the bottom line is everything that you do to serve your constituents is done with the best of heart and the best of intentions. But everything you do costs money, right? I mean, what does it cost to just fire up a fire truck? What does it cost to fire up a lawnmower to park? I got to replace a water valve. What does that cost? I mean, everything you do costs money. You're not paying any less for gas last year than you were this year, like the rest of us. So yeah, this is all these discussions, and this is why I'm proud of the leadership we have in Thurston County, because all of the leaders that I know weigh these things as they make their decisions. And so I'm proud of all of you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Any other questions? Councilmember Jefferson, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question, Mayor. Thanks, Jeff. I moved here from Lacey. And my question is, what goes into deciding what our property taxes are? Because it was much lower in Lacey than it is in Tumwater. So can you discuss that a little bit?
Yeah, it depends on the tax code. By the way, I think Lacey is much better than Tumwater, although I do have a love for Tumwater. I'm just biased towards Lacey, I just gotta say.
Mayor, can you mute Jeff Gadman? I'm sorry, I can't.
It just depends. This is where the budgets parts of it comes in. I don't know what area of Lacey you lived in, so I don't know exactly which tax districts were serving you, and the same where you're at now. But what I will say is that it just depends. You know, are you living in an area where are you living in a fire district versus the city of Tumwater? You know, so is their levy affecting you? One of the biggest changes we had in our property taxes in the last 3 years was a McCleary decision, right? The state decided that the Supreme Court decided the state needed to fund education. So it shifted a lot of the funding to the state, and the legislature thought they'd come up with a calculation that would be fair to the local school districts. Well, it turned out the larger school districts, especially in the larger urban areas, Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, those school districts couldn't survive on the local levy limits that they were given. So the legislature had another dollar to their levy limits. And so, yeah, our property taxes have gone up significantly, and 60% or more of your property tax that you pay goes to schools, either at the state or local level.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Any other questions? So I really appreciate this, because I think the misnomer is when people see this rapid increase in property values, everybody, the average citizen, just thinks that their property tax is going to go up by thousands and thousands of dollars. And so this is, I think, very helpful, and something that I think the public can use to kind of understand how it doesn't go up quite the way they think it does. So.
Well, and I appreciate it. And thank you all again for entertaining me here and listening to me, because this is something I found over the years, especially as I had discussions at the assessor's office, people don't understand how the property tax system works. And the more I can educate them, the more understanding there is. And I found a lot more people that were like, oh, okay, I get it. So now they're paying attention to their local taxing districts, right? They're paying attention to what the library is doing. They're paying attention to what their fire districts are doing, so that instead of blaming assessed values all the time, they're actually paying attention to what's happening in the budgets that affect their property. And I would love to give this talk universally. I would love to give it once a month to a large audience, but there aren't as many people as interested in it as the policymakers.
Great. Any other questions? Great, thank you, Jeff. And we do have the presentation that you had, so we can have that to refer back to. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, and feel free to post it on your website if you want to. And I'm always available for questions. If you want to call me, email me, if you want to meet in person, I'm more than happy to for any of you. And thank you. Thank you all for what you do for the city of Tumwater.
Thank you, Jeff. Perfect. All right, with John, did you have something, or are you just waiting? So thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Next item is LOT, Planning for the Future, and John Dunn will kick that off also. Thank you.
Yeah, just real quick, Matt is a significant partner, and his friends at LOT are significant partners with the city of Tumwater. One of the things that was exciting to me 13 years ago when I came to Tumwater is we don't have to treat our own sewage. And I got to tell you, from a city administrator standpoint, that's a wonderful thing. And I hope as a city council member, you also think that's a wonderful thing. And we have very competent people and an outstanding organization. Matt Kennelly is the new executive director. Councilmember Dahlhoff is our representative to the governing board of LOT. And when the folks from LOT come about every year to just sort of update us on what's happening in LOT or at LOT, and sort of one of the big projects they've been working on is an assessment of groundwater quality and recharge. And I think that's part of what's getting covered today. So I'll stop talking and introduce someone who knows way more about the topic, and that's Matt Kennelly from LOT.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. I'll share my screen here. Let me know if that's, can you see that okay? Yeah, thanks for having me. That was a great introduction and I appreciate it. Yeah, so my name is Matt Kennelly. Became the executive director here officially last month, part of a succession planning approach here. Mike Strube, former director. I've been at LOT going on about 8 years and been doing wastewater treatment design for a little over 20. And our community does a really good job at it. So I'm excited to share about what we're doing and how it's looking for the future with you tonight and get any questions that you have. So just by way of overview, I like to start the presentations about what is LOT, and certainly for anybody watching this later. So LOT, the LOTT, is Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Thurston County. And just as John said, the idea behind formation of LOT, originally back in the 70s, but what you see now kind of formed in 2000, is that regional wastewater treatment is much more effective to consolidate resources in our community. So one elected official from each of the partner governments from LOT is appointed, and Councilmember Dahlhoff has fulfilled that role here for Tumwater. And then we have, so board of directors then executes that policy. Our mission is to protect public health and the environment by cleaning and restoring water resources. We have about 175,000 people in the service area. About 68% of those are connected to sewer, so just shy of about 60,000 accounts. How we do that treatment is primarily at our Bud Inlet treatment plant that's in downtown Olympia. The city of Olympia originally built this plant back in the 50s. It's been expanded over time. And LOT has been running it since 2005 officially, when all the employees came over. But our main treatment facility treats about 13 million gallons per day. And to put that in perspective, what 13 million gallons is you take a football field and you could fill it with water 40 feet tall. So a 4-story building, essentially, that's about 13 million gallons per day. And that's water that is harmful to us as people and harmful to the environment. So our job is to clean that up and restore it to be able to be reused or safe for putting it back out into Puget Sound. And that's a protected, we do that to protect water quality because we have the most stringent discharge limits on Puget Sound, and it makes sense. We're at the bottom of the sound, but we do have the most strict limits of any treatment plant on Puget Sound here. We're guided by what we call a wastewater resource management plan. And there was an effort back in the late 90s with a lot of public engagement where the community came together with consultant help and said, okay, how are we going to manage wastewater treatment as our community continues to grow? How can we responsibly manage growth and continue to treat to these high levels? And so there's this series of public values that were created about meeting future wastewater needs and how to do that, treating wastewater as a resource, maximizing benefits to the environment, and looking to provide multiple community benefits over time. And it came up with these strategies. It was called the highly managed plan because it effectively had this annual planning approach. But these management strategies that put into place in 2000 was, first off, was flow reduction. The more flow you can get out of the system that doesn't come to the treatment plant to be treated, the less resources are needed and infrastructure to treat that flow. So there's efforts to get flow out of the system before it actually came down for treatment. Continued discharge to Butt Inlet was part of that. There's high winter flows that come in from some combined sewers, but also there were studies done to show that effective treatment could also be appropriate for Butt Inlet. So continued discharge was part of that original management strategy, as was reclaimed water. We produce reclaimed water today, but what that original plan set into motion was building a series of satellite treatment plants in addition to the Butt Inlet treatment plant I showed you, and creating reclaimed water for irrigation, reuse, but also doing groundwater infiltration. So at the time and into the 2000s, the lot management at the time looked to buy properties for future satellite plants and future groundwater infiltration. So lot owns a series of different parcels for those future satellite plants and groundwater infiltration. And it also set into motion this continuous planning approach, this highly managed approach, which is different in our community than some others that you see. So other areas might do a sewerage plan that looks out 20 years, they expand their treatment plant, and then they grow into it. That's over 20 years. But what we have here in our community is this annual approach, and that's been effective in saving us money over time with delaying some investments till when they're needed, but also taking advantage of some new technology in that just-in-time approach. So with flow reduction, it saved about 1.3 million gallons. When we look back through 1997, all those low flow toilets, the vouchers that lots provided, the outreach, the working with the cities such as Tumwater to reduce that inflow and infiltration that comes into the sewer system. That's been really effective. It's kind of waning now, considering that a lot of that flow has been reduced out of the system. And as we continue to grow, there's these high flow toilets that are already part of code, low flow devices in your shower, for example. So it's kind of reaching a bit of its limits, but into the future, we're still going to be messaging and promoting water conservation because it's good for our community, it's good for a lot. And so we do that through the Wet Science Center, we do that through school programs, and continue other outreach efforts. And when it comes to Butt Inlet discharge, I mentioned we have the highest level of treatment on Puget Sound. And what that means is we do advanced secondary treatment. So we treat for nutrients, and that's primarily nitrogen. So treatment plants up to the north are kind of aerating their wastewater, removing that oxygen demand that it would take on the environment. We actually have a complex biological process that removes nitrogen. And we recently upgraded our nutrient removal process. It was approaching almost 30 years old. So we've been doing nitrogen removal for about 30 years. We're really excited about this new system. Most of it is online now. We're just finishing up over the next few months. And our performance, when you compare it against other treatment plants that similar to what we're doing with biological nutrient removal, we rank some of the best in the nation. Reclaimed water production, and as originally envisioned, set about to build 2 treatment plants. So there's a Martin Way reclaimed water plant. That's a satellite treatment plant in Lacey, about 1.5 million gallons per day is of production of all reuse water. And then the Butt Inlet reclaimed water plant is the treatment plant that we built at the Butt Inlet treatment plant that produces about that 1.5 million gallons per day. So Martin Way itself produces reclaimed water for groundwater infiltration, which I'll show you in the next slide. But the Bud Inlet treatment plant, the Bud Inlet reclaimed water plant, is what produces that reclaimed water that it makes its way to the Tumwater Golf Course. So that 1 million gallon storage tank that you have on near T Street, with the city came and put a park on top of it, and that collaboration, that water from that 1 million gallon storage tank feeds the golf course, which needs about 600,000 gallons per day. So drop for drop, that's an offset against potable supplies that doesn't need a potable source. It can use a safe reclaimed water source. And that tank itself is an example of the community benefits that we look for in projects like that. Now out in Lacey at the Martin Way Reclaimed Water Plant, that water goes to our Hawks Prairie Ponds recharge basin. So that's groundwater infiltration following wetland treatment. So it's a park, again, with the community benefit element by integrating that into what's required for treatment. So that water gets infiltrated into the ground for recharge. The city of Lacey and Olympia own and operate the Woodland Creek Recharge Facility, which is a mitigation site for municipal water rights. So they tap off on that pipeline just upstream of the Hawks Prairie Ponds. So what we're doing now with master planning, what we've done and what we're rolling out here this month and next, is looking out to 2050, because that original plan, that wastewater resource management plan, had a 25-year time frame where it sunsets just after 2020. And a lot of it's still accurate and sets into place a great framework for the future. But what it needs updating is more accurate information than we have now. So we know now more about our population projections. That's, every year we know more, but certainly after 25 years, we have a better outlook through 2050. And that's our planning year for master planning. We also know that the conversion rate from septic tanks to sewers was projected to be much higher back in 2000 than where we're at now. And that's picked up the pace a little bit, but we know better about that conversion rate and can adjust growth factors. And we recently did a reclaimed water infiltration study that John mentioned to show us what that reclaimed water use is safe for groundwater infiltration. So we have that information. We have some lessons learned as well when we operate decentralized facilities. So the picture here in the upper right is a membrane treatment plant that's out at the Martin Way Reclaimed Water Plant. We know that it takes some extra resources to operate things like that. So we've learned how to operate them effectively and some lessons learned. We also have integrated some new technologies, and we have a pilot team approach at LOT where we vet new technologies and we can apply them on future projects. We also know better about the regulatory environment. Ecology has recently put a limit on the total maximum daily load of nitrogen and the oxygen demand of discharge into Bud Inlet. So that affects how we treat water here at the Bud Inlet treatment plant, and also put some additional requirements on us that we were already still operating below that, but we have a better picture of the regulatory environment. And finally, it's climate change and weather. With more intense storms, we need to move up the timeline of how we upgrade our pumps, how we collaborate with the city of Olympia and the Port of Olympia on sea level rise, those type of things that helps with our layout of our planning. So when we set out for the 2050 master planning process, we organized it into 3 phases. First, we did phase 1, where we focused on our Bud Inlet treatment plant. That's primarily where we do our treatment, and took a hard look at that and did all the layouts. Then we looked at capacity strategy next. And that is that reclaimed water strategy to build more reclaimed water infrastructure to get water out of Bud Inlet and reuse that and revisit that capacity strategy long-term. So it was somewhat iterative with phase 1, but that's that capacity look at that next stage. And then we're in phase 3 now, where we're sharing out what results we found. We're getting that feedback, and we're starting with the partner jurisdictions, Tumwater being the first presentation that I'm giving in this series over the next 2 weeks to our partners. So phase 1 in our Bud Inlet treatment plant, we just took a comprehensive look at everything from we've got clarifiers and digesters and screening and pumping and all of that. And process by process with a consultant we hired and our staff that are technically up to speed on all this, we looked at each of the processes and said, which ones need to be upgraded? Is the footprint big enough? Do we need more property? How flexible can we be if things change? That's a big factor in how we plan. And what we came up with was a 2050 site plan that maximizes flexibility. We're pretty hemmed in at the Bud Inlet Treatment Plant in downtown Olympia. But the good thing is we have some recent upgrades of some process tankage where we consolidated treatment processes into tanks, and it's going to be a much more efficient from an electrical standpoint, but also it freed up some tankage to use for other things. Even that being said, we still identified we had some property needs that as our community continues to grow and depending on how treatment goes, we know what we would need to do in order to expand. So we're talking to the Port of Olympia right now about purchasing some additional property to have that option to expand, as well as looking long-term for a wet weather treatment facility, for other type of biosolids handling, those type of things, that where they would go. So really just laying it all out and having a good flexible plan. And then in phase 2, we looked at capacity again. So that first option, that original plan said, okay, build more satellite treatment facilities, build more reclaimed water and use it for groundwater infiltration, use it for irrigation. So that was one of the main options that we had as a capacity strategy. But we also came up with the option of enhancing treatment at the Bud Inlet Treatment Plant. Because we're doing such effective treatment, we found the lower we can get treatment, the more effective we can get that, the actual more capacity you have. So the reclaimed water option, the original plan, multiple satellite facilities, it actually had 3 different treatment plants. One actually was envisioned in the Deschutes Valley, in the brewery district there. So Lot owns property down there, and that was envisioned to have a satellite plant and then be able to put water someplace down further south for infiltration sites. It also envisioned having an extensive purple pipe network. So almost like a water system where you have this spider of all these purple pipes doing reuse. And you see this a lot in areas like Florida, Arizona, those type of things that kind of irrigate year round. But what we found over time in these new considerations is operating multiple satellite plants can be an additional workload that is somewhat ineffective. Our current plant in Martin Way is operating very well, meets permit, does this job really well, but it requires additional staffing, requires some security, chemicals, screening, pumping, all these things that are consolidated at our main plant, including biosolids, that biosolids product that's left over after treatment that needs further efforts. That actually needs to happen at the main plant. The other thing that occurs when you have a decentralized facility is it can be flow limited. So creating more reclaimed water, even though Lacey might be able to use that out there, it's actually limited on flow. So we have to wait for wastewater to actually get higher before we turn it into reclaimed water. And you're not limited when you have a central facility. The other thing is that these undeveloped sites that we purchased, the infiltration sites to install facilities to infiltrate groundwater like we do at the Hawks Prairie sites, those sites they now have on the lower end of the capacity range that was envisioned. So we've done some more studies to say, yeah, it's probably more like a 1 million gallon per day infiltration rate as opposed to 3. So you have to start connecting multiple sites in order to get your capacity. And those purple pipe networks that were envisioned, they have their place, but they really get limited to where there's the main force main, the main system that folk can tap off of, that the jurisdictions can really tap off of and use that. So there's a place for it, but the development of additional pump stations just for reclaimed water and all that has just really not developed. So the reclaimed water option, this first option in the old plan, we explored it and developed it further and said, okay, it probably looks like the Martin Way Reclaimed Water Plant, the Hawks Prairie Recharge Basins, those can expand over time. But in order to get capacity, if we don't want to discharge out into Butt Inlet anymore as our community continues to grow, and the answer is producing more reclaimed water, the site that has the most capacity is the site that's furthest to the south. And it figures, right? Because it's an 8-mile pipeline, $115 million plus just to get it down there and put that kind of site in place that can take the flow that we need and probably end up picking up some of these smaller sites along the way. So it's quite the investment to be able to do that. It certainly is an option that we have against the new option, which is enhanced treatment. So it's a lot more cost effective to do this. And what this involves is just focusing on the Butt Inlet treatment plant and further reducing nitrogen and that biochemical oxygen demand, basically how much oxygen that treated water, that untreated water would demand from the environment. And that's how we treat that. So there's additional treatment steps that we can insert in the process near the end in order to get that additional treatment. So this slide illustrates what I'm talking about with this enhanced treatment. So lot is regulated on the total amount of nutrients in our cleaned water. And I'm simplifying a little bit, but what that means is the total pounds that we have in nitrogen, for example, in any given day. That's what ecology says. You're limited to that. So as our community continues to grow, you can't go over that certain threshold. So how can we continue to meet that goal as our community continues to grow? Because that's LOT's task, is supporting responsibly that growth. So the enhanced treatment, though, option can further reduce the nutrients. So if I take a given amount of cleaned water that LOT cleans to, the best on Puget Sound, but we still have some remaining nitrogen in there. That's the yellow. And it's just that size just to kind of illustrate it. But this given amount of clean water and its allowable total nitrogen discharge. So now I have the same amount of clean water, but I have enhanced treatment. So I reduce that nitrogen further. By reducing that nitrogen further, I can actually add more water to the process to get to that same limit. So we still haven't exceeded that total pounds load that we're regulated on, but all that additional water can come in and we can clean it to that. So that's what we were talking about with enhanced treatment. So we can accommodate community growth while maintaining our permit limits. So the strategies in summary that we developed out of this was, yes, focusing on the enhanced treatment at Butt Inlet is a lot more cost effective. We have promising new technologies that are proven that we can implement. We're already doing well, but we know we would add further when we need to. And that highly managed plan looks at that every year. And we could significantly increase discharge capacity, so accommodate that growth. But there's also a part about expanding reclaimed water that we don't want to miss, because that is a community value. Treating wastewater as a resource is important. And because we have capacity to expand at our existing facilities at Martin Way and the Butt Inlet Reclaimed Water Plant, we will expand those as the demand dictates and as that need for lot is for our capacity. So it's nice because we can kind of marry these two up, but kind of and have a good plan and flexible plan for the future. So what we have at the end of the day is a plan, and the 2050 plan. It's cost effective because it focuses on focusing on our existing infrastructure, which was part of our public values. We don't have to staff up for all these different treatment plants around the community, build these extensive pipelines. We could also surplus some of these properties that we've purchased for developing that original plan. It's adaptable because we're still going to expand reclaimed water, but we can wait for when that demand shows up. So, for example, in Tumwater, as you continue to evaluate your water supplies in the future and you look to possibly expand reclaimed water, and we've at LOT, our staff is coordinated with Tumwater staff. We have that flexibility. We have a general sense of what we would do because we know we can expand our main plant, double that flow, and be able to work with the city of Tumwater in that example to be able to provide that treatment. There's a capacity benefit to lot, and we can do that with Olympia and we can do that with Tumwater, and it's a lot more flexible approach. The thing I also like about this option adaptability is by adding further treatment at the Bud Inlet plant and focusing on getting those nitrogen levels lower, you actually move the needle on a spectrum towards a potable water quality. You're not getting potable in this step. You're not, but you're building additional treatment that as further and water supplies over time in the decades to come become more limited, you're actually looking to add further and further treatment as you get down the road. So it really sets ourselves up for whatever happens well into the future for additional water quality. It supports those public values, treating wastewater as a resource, providing multiple community benefits, and flexibility. That's really big for us, is being able to adapt to changing regulations, changing needs of our partners, all these things. So we feel confident that we can effectively respond to the growth that the lot partners determine as we go into the future through 2050. So we're messaging this out tonight, as I mentioned, and to other of the partners, but we just today set the date for our community forum, and it's number 2, because originally we had community forum number 1 was about our reclaimed water infiltration study, but forum 2 is February 27th. We'll go through that effort, we'll get feedback, and we'll do a SEPA review and ultimately ask our lot board to adopt this plan and set that into motion for us. So I'll take any questions that you have on all that.
Councilmember Schneider.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Wonderful presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So my question is, how are you preparing the Bud Inlet treatment plant from future sea level rises?
So the way that we are protecting the plant for future sea level rises is collaboration with the port and the city. The good thing is that from a sense of flooding, like overland flooding into the plant, there's only a couple select areas that really are susceptible that, we're making some improvements even now when we add fencing, we're adding short stem walls, we're doing those type of things. So we have some interim plans in place. And then the real threat to over time is the flooding of the downtown streets that go into this combined sewers that make their way to lot, because that salt water then affects our biology and all that. So there's near-term steps. There's steps where even with this last high tide, we're putting magnetic mats on those combined sewers in connection with the city of Olympia. So as the water comes up and the mats cover those catch basins, then it recedes and you remove the catch basins to protect the plant. And then longer term, it's about kind of working with the city on a more comprehensive plan for building walls and those type of things as part of that collaboration effort.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Dalhoff.
Thank you, Mayor. And Charlie, there is a group that gets together, the Sea Level Rise, and I represent LOT on that committee as well. And there's a plan. It's really, really interesting because we're in Tumwater, right? We don't think about it, but there is an impact. So Charlie, if you do have time to look at that, I would love your feedback. And then Matt, one of our last meetings, which I think is really interesting, maybe my council mates won't, but the new project with Department of Health, the is it epidemiology?
Yes.
The sampling. Could you maybe just share a
Sure.
little bit about that?
So you probably have all read about early on, definitely COVID, about testing wastewater. And so there's a lot of questions about, well, how can we test wastewater in our community and get early results from what, COVID may bring, or the rise and fall of the different waves. And so early on, there's a lot of private companies doing it. And now it's exciting because, and the federal government was doing it, but now our State Department of Health is more spun up on it. And we are collaborating with them to take samples and provide that into their system. wastewater epidemiology is something that I see is going to be one of the futures of wastewater. And I think COVID is helping take that leap to get there. So it's not a whole lot of extra effort on our part because we take samples and we test them anyway. So taking an extra sample and providing it to their lab. But it's really exciting that I think kind of taking these next steps into that realm is one of the futures.
Councilmember Kathy?
Yes. Thank you for that. It's interesting. I remember my first time I took a trip through a lot with a group of Girls Without Limits from the YWCA, and all these kids were like, ew, and oh, and it was just every possible reaction along the way. And guess what? Every year, the new group of them wanted to take a tour of lot. So
Right. We love to give tours.
yeah. I have a question about, and it's a issue that's going on in Tumwater and has to do with the port and the new bottling facility that uses tons of water and that doesn't have the best wastewater expulsion. How does that impact what you do? And is that on Tumwater, or how does something like that work? Because there's a lot of conversation and controversy about this.
Sure. So by design, the city of Tumwater then takes the lead in whatever that industry coming to town, Coca-Cola or otherwise. And so the city of Tumwater then determines, yes, you accept that this industry is coming to town and all those development regulations. Then that determination of how much sewer that they would use, the capacity of the sewer, which typically goes by the water supply. When you have a water supply, or sometimes it's different if they have a sewer meter or something. But when that connection happens, then that fee is paid to lot for that connection. And so that goes into a fund for us where we make sure that we build capacity to treat that water. We have in our planning process kind of a buffer. So when big users come to town, it moves up the date of when we might need to build something new, but it's not like we get behind. We know we're looking pretty far out, and we know what we would build. It's just the timelines are constantly shifting, industries coming to town or not. We don't have a lot of major industry that affects it, like the Olympia Brewery, for example. So that's how that happens. I did and request, and our staff is coordinating with the city of Tumwater staff and getting some more numbers with regard to what Coca-Cola might be as far as usage of sewer. And I'd be able to provide more information at that time. But right now, all the information I have is that we're built for this, and we go with your lead and we respond accordingly.
And our lead has to do with how much water we want to expend on something like this. Is that right? So it doesn't impact what goes on in Tumwater or rates or whatever. It's more environmental than it is.
Yeah. So with regard to also sewer, like your collection system, as far as how to convey that, because City of Tumwater then is also in charge of the collection system as it makes its way down to lot. At some point, it combines with another jurisdiction, and that's when lot takes over. Yeah.
So we would have to be looking at that. Do we have the capacity to get it to lot or to combine with the others?
Right. And what we're focused on at lot is then, when they have those combined sewers, then we're looking at those capacities, and every year we're updating our values for each of the partners on where how much growth is happening, and does it meet the projected numbers.
Now, when new water comes in like this, or a new business or a new whatever it is, do you look at what the possibilities are that are in that water so that you can treat it? So that, the wastewater from a plant like this is different than the wastewater from my house or from someplace else. And there's a lot of conversation about industrial waste, and definitely in this process. So.
Right. So we're responsible for a pre-treatment program. That's part of what the partners agreed on for lot to manage. And so a user, let's just take Pepsi, for example. Pepsi has a pre-treatment requirement where they're regulated in addition and pay an additional charge for that excess nutrient load that they're providing, different than, a business not in that type of business, right? There's certain businesses that rise to doing pre-treatment and needing that additional regulation. So they pay additional charges for that. And they have the option of providing some type of pre-treatment before it actually gets to lot if they wanted to take that on or pay. So that's how that works in those type of industries.
Thank you. Those are all very professional and helpful and knowledgeable things that you've passed on. I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Councilmember Gabi.
So I have my elementary chemistry is getting a hold of me. The nitrogen, organic nitrogen that is produced through that waste, do you guys by any chance whatever is not used, do you sell them to any as ammonium or fertilizer or so? What do you guys do with it?
Yeah, good question. So the ammonia that comes in ultimately goes through the process of going to nitrate, nitrite, and goes to nitrogen gas. So most of the ammonia comes in, gets nitrified, denitrified, and turns into nitrogen gas. Where the renewables and things come in is actually the beneficial product of the biosolids. So the nitrogen remaining in the biosolids, so that's that broken down bacteria that we use for treating wastewater or those solids, that gets taken over to Eastern Washington after it's stabilized and put on agricultural fields as called a Class B biosolids. And the farmers love it over there. The trucking cost ends up that we actually have to pay more than it costs, but it does offset it considerably. So, and then we also produce biogas from that breakdown of the process. So we turn that into electricity. So there's biogas and biosolids and reclaimed water. Those are the three primary reclaimed products.
Good. Thank you very much. Good. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions? Great. Well, thanks, Matt. That's very informative. And sometimes we don't know all those different benefits that you get from that when, we just look at it one way, and it's very interesting to see all the additional benefits. And I have done a tour before, but it's been several years. I might just do a tour again and see some of the upgrades from the last time I was there. So
yeah, we'd love that. Thank you for your support. We're doing a lot of good things in our community in this field, so it's nice to share. Well, thank you.
And we love the fact that we're using the reclaimed water instead of our actual drinking water for the golf course and other things. So that makes it much better too. So
yes. Okay.
Thank you very much. All right. Next item is Mayor's City Administrator Report. John, did you want to go first?
Sure. I promised this item back in December. I just wanted to create some space to talk about our meetings and the virtualness or the hybridness or the in-personness of those meetings. Just sort of a reminder for everyone, your regular council meetings are obviously hybrid. They are available in a variety of different forms electronically. We have some number of people who show up from council, and that again varies from almost the majority to a few, and staff who primarily, if they're presenting, may show up in person. Otherwise, they're virtually. Fairly low attendance from the population, from the public in person, but we suspect fairly more substantial numbers in the virtual world to those meetings. And then we do committee meetings and work sessions. We call it entirely virtual. It's important to note that in these meetings, we're required by law to create an in-person location for people to come to. That's a new thing since COVID. So for every one of these virtual meetings, there is a staff person in a room somewhere Oftentimes it's the council conference room. Sometimes it is the fire department training room if it's an RFA meeting. Who's sitting in that room waiting for someone from the public to show up just in case someone is looking for an in-person location to come to a meeting. The law as it stands today requires that be available. There is probably some push by AWC to try to change that. That has been incredibly time consuming. There are some concerns about safety for people being sort of isolated in City Hall when there's not anyone else around. And we've been one of the test jurisdictions who's actually been keeping track of the number of people who show up at those meetings in person, and we have yet to get to one. So it's just not a particularly utilized thing, but comes at a pretty decent cost. So again, just wanted, and again, the pros and cons of virtual things are just like our work world. The virtual things are in many ways more convenient. They are more convenient for people who are watching these meetings. I think almost all of us have attended meetings being somewhere else in the nation, whether we're on vacation or work or whatever. So I think it's brought that convenience to it, but I think we've also, I would say, paid a price in terms of some of the interpersonal relationship building time with each other, time with the public. That's happened as a result of being virtual. So that's just a bunch of ramblings on my part. Most of all, I just wanted to create space in case you wanted to talk about any of these meetings, if you wanted to change anything, if you want to talk about schedule. This would be a great space to do that. And if you don't want to make any changes and leave everything the same, then that's fine also.
Any comments? Councilmember Althauser?
I just have a question. John, is it the case that we have to do the one person in the room even for committees, or is it just work session and council?
It's also for committees.
Okay.
Councilmember Swarthout, and then I'll go to Councilmember Cathey.
I was wondering if this was the time to bring up like changes in our meeting schedule, the timing. Would that be appropriate now, or should we finish the conversation about virtual or non-virtual?
Oh, I think in any question you have, it works.
Okay. I was like tonight trying to get here by 5:30. I realized that we're still remote, and but I was interested in and talked to a few of the other council members as well to see about if the possibility of changing the work session time from 5:30 to 6 o'clock. Giving a little bit more time to get there, and then perhaps even people being able to get something to eat before the meeting starts. And so I would like to throw that out as a proposal, see what the rest of the council members think.
Councilmember Cathey?
Yeah. I had a question before Eileen threw that out. So if we want to talk about her comment first, that's fine.
Yeah, we can discuss Councilmember Swarthout's comment. So any Councilmember Daha?
Thanks, Mayor. I am in support of that. For those on this panel that are working, 6 o'clock would be beneficial and better regarding timing consumption and avoiding me being hangry, which I think is best for everyone. So I'm in support of 6 p.m.
Councilmember. So just a minute, Councilmember Schneider and then Councilmember Jefferson.
Thank you. I'm in support of that as well. I have the luxury to be retired, so I can show up just about any time, but I respect those of you that work, and 6 o'clock would definitely work for me.
Councilmember Jefferson?
Yes, so is it 6 o'clock virtual or in person?
This would be for the work session only. Am I
Right.
understanding that correctly?
Right,
Yeah.
so our work sessions are going to remain virtual, correct?
That'll be the next topic for discussion, but yeah.
Okay, yes, I recommend keeping it virtual and starting at 6 p.m.
Councilmember Gabi?
For me, that is a big yes, 6 o'clock.
All right. So I'm not hearing anybody opposed to starting this at 6 o'clock, so.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Councilmember Kathy, did you want to have something else?
Well, I wanted to talk about what Administrator Doan put out there.
Okay,
I would definitely like to see us stay virtual through the winter months, for sure, and maybe talk about this again in 3 months or something like that. I think part of the reason people don't come out, I'm not sure people ever will, because this is very convenient, and I know there are many more people watching than are showing up. But I would like to keep it the same, the way it is. And I know they did a big thing on TV. Oh, look, this impacts Michael and others here. Look, we're all back here in the legislature, and whoopee, we have on no masks. And I looked at all those people sitting shoulder to shoulder in that place, and I thought, well, who's going to be first to get the flu, or who's going to get first to whatever? I think we're still in a be careful mode here, and I think what we're doing is working well, and and I think staying virtual for all of our meetings. I'm not happy about someone having to sit in a room somewhere, and I hope that can change. But as far as how we're doing and conducting our business and staying as healthy as we can, I'd like to definitely see us do it through the next winter months, at least 3 months or so, and talk about it again.
just for clarification, you're talking about the committee meetings and the work sessions in Zoom and hybrid for the main council meetings, correct?
I'm talking about everything, keeping it the same for the next few months. Mhm.
All right. Councilmember Althauser?
Yeah, I was just gonna agree. I think it makes sense to reassess in the spring. Like if there is a change that gets made to the person in the room rule, which that seems silly to me. I totally agree. That seems silly to me. I hope that that's a change that gets made. But if there is a change that gets made, then that provides us an opportunity to sort of reassess in a couple months after we'll know whether that change gets made. That doesn't seem long-term sustainable. Like, well, I don't know, maybe it is, but or maybe we can rotate or something, because that does sort of rub me the wrong way. That really is kind of a bummer. Like I didn't know that was an actual policy, but I sort of suspected it because you always see the room and there's someone in it at the beginning, but I think that I overlooked it. So I apologize to our staff whoever is sitting in the room right now listening in. I apologize. I'm also very grateful for your public service so that we're able to engage in this thoughtful conversation.
Any other comments? All right, so what I'm hearing is just keeping it the same as it is and then revisit it in a few months, like springtime sometime. All right. So we'll look at that March, April timeframe and bring it back. Councilmember Swarthout?
Did we agree though that we'll be looking at changing the work session start times to 6 o'clock? Will that be looped in?
Yeah, because that was
Okay.
pretty much unanimous on that one.
Okay, thank you. All right, thanks.
If we can do that at the next work session, it'll happen then.
Mhm.
I'm not entirely sure what the mechanics are, so we'll just have to figure that out.
I think Councilman Karen Patrick is, did you have something?
I just wanted to say that it does require an amendment to the council rules. So as soon as that happens, you can change the time.
Okay, so we would need to change the council rules adopted at a council meeting. So it may not be the next work session, but we will work on that as quickly as possible. So thank you for that reminder. All right, did you have anything else, John?
I do not.
Okay, I had one thing that, so the Memorial Day observance, there is, the Oddfellows has an event, and I have spoken at it, Councilmember Swarthouse has spoken at it. And Councilmember Jefferson is not able to attend it this year. Is there anyone interested in giving, in doing the speech? It's roughly 5 to 10 minutes, and it's need to be there like 11:30 on, what day is it? The May 29th. And the program starts at about 12:30, and it only lasts about an hour or so. Councilmember Doha.
Thank you, Mayor. I was hoping that Eileen can do it again because she was supposed to do it during this pandemic and it was canceled. And she has an amazing speech. And so I was hoping that she would do it again because of her perspective of being a spouse of someone in the military. It is often unheard of, and it still gives me goosebumps. And so I was hoping, I'm putting her on a spot right now. I'm hoping she would do it again because I think it's really timely and really impactful. And she was canceled on last time.
So you've been kind of you've been nominated.
No, there's been some discussion about that. And so at this point, I don't know where I'll be on Memorial Day, but I would be glad to do the speech as I'm available. So at this point, like I said, I don't have any plans for Memorial Day. And thank you for the compliments on my speech, Leah.
All right, perfect. So I don't see a huge amount of hands going up to be second in line for that.
If Eileen can't do it, I can do it as a perspective of being in a family of military service people for multiple generations.
Right.
But Eileen is amazing.
And I did it last year, and I don't want to do it 2 years in a row.
If Eileen can't, I would love to do it.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll have you as the backup. Excellent. All right. With that, I don't think I had anything else. Wow, we're going to get out of here at a decent time tonight. So with that, we will go ahead and adjourn and see everyone next week at the city council meetings. Thank you.